Legendary Heroes, a Gauntlet Dark Legacy-based fic. Chapter 14. The Web is Weaved. Melaine, the Spider Queen, sat in her web high in the darkest part of the forest realm. She was busy snacking on one of her foes. It was a delicious snack for her now's twisted tastes. This particular one had been one of her sister's friends. It wasn't a friend that had known anything of where her sister had gone, but it was a good meal, knowing that it would hurt her sister in some way. As she snacked, she noticed one of the lizard men approaching her web. The lizard men had been good allies to help control the bottom of the forest realm, and were also key in turning the forest floor into an acidic swamp. In the lizard man's grip, however, was another of her foes. In fact, it was one of the higher ranks of archers that her sister was part of. It was obvious to her that the figure was disgusted by the sight. Elaine tossed the body aside, which was mostly withered due to the drained bodily fluids, and rubbed her hands together. "Oh, who is this you've brought for me?" As she rubbed her hands together, her front spider legs rubbed together as well. It was a sight she knew would unnerve any of her enemies. She watched as the lizard man got closer, forcing his captive closer to her. As he did, she heard him hiss, "She is one of those elfish archers. She tried to slay one of the gargoyles sent to us." This was something that upset the lizardman, and herself as well. Scorn had sent those gargoyles to her to help in the effort of corrupting the forest realm. However, the bold action told her a lot of how important this prisoner was. She motioned for the lizard man to push the prisoner forward, and he did so. She noticed the lizard man had tied the prisoner's arms behind her. The prisoner, however, fell to her knees, but managed not to fall forward with her face into the web. It would have been difficult for her to answer any questions if that happened. Melaine brought her head down closer to the prisoner, but not close enough to allow the prisoner to foolishly attempt something, and said, "Very brave of you to try to injure one of the gargoyles. Now tell me where my dear sister Tori has gone, and maybe I'll spare your life for a little while." To her shock, the female didn't answer with words, but managed to break her bonds and pull out a blade. It looked like a scimitar, and since the woman's legs were stuck to the web, she threw the blade at the Spider Queen. It was obvious that the female thought she could hurt her. As fast as she could react, Melaine used one of her spider legs to smack the weapon out of the air and onto the web. She also launched some webbing right at the female. She was so outraged by the attack that she made sure the female was completely immobilized in webbing before she was done. She then turned her attention to the fallen weapon. She had been correct when she thought it was a scimitar, but there was something more to it. After a moment, she realized it was most likely Rasha's scimitar. Scorn had sent her a message that it might have ended up in the forest realm. Once she was sure of that, she raised a hand and flicked one of the main strands of her web. In an instant, a few of the treants came forward. Before any of them could ask what she wanted, she pointed to the scimitar and ordered, "Take that and seal it in one of the trees. I want to make sure none of them can find it again." She watched as they nodded and responded in their gibberish language. Communication with the tree ants was always difficult, since their native tongue was so ancient only a few words had been translated. At least she knew she could keep them in line with the number of spiders she had at her command. After a moment, one of the lizard men generals arrived. With him, he carried a stone with a glowing green rune on it. As he approached her with it, he said, "Lord Scorn sends this rune stone for us to protect." She nodded, looking the stone over. Back in her pre-merge days, she had seen portals that had similar runestones in them. They usually connected the various areas of the forest. As she looked over this runestone, she saw Scorn's visage appear between her, the lizardman general, and the captive prisoner. She noticed that his visage saw the runestone as well and said, "I see it has arrived. Make sure it is well hidden. I have no doubt Sumner is going to send individuals to retrieve it." She then saw him turn to face her. "By the way, did you find Rasha's scimitar?" She nodded and pointed to her webbed prisoner. "Yes, that foolish individual tried to throw it at me. She must have thought it would have decapitated me. I was much faster than she thought." She laughed at that, and heard Scorn laugh as well. To her surprise, she saw the prisoner had managed to free her head from the webbing, and heard her shout in defiance, "You laugh now, but when I get free, I'll get that scimitar and make sure I cut off your—" The last word was cut off when Melaine shot more webbing into the prisoner's mouth. She then lobbed a few more webbing cocoons to the left and right of the prisoner. She watched, especially as Scorn turned to face the prisoner. At that moment, smaller spiders erupted from them and started crawling over the prisoner. Each spider sank its fangs into the captive prisoner, feeding on her. While they were muffled, they could hear the screams of the prisoner managed to make it through the webbing. The death was satisfying to both of them. When that show was over, Scorn turned to face Melaine again and said, "You are doing very well here. The corruption of this realm is proceeding faster than the others." Melaine nodded and bowed her body. To know she pleased Scorn helped improve her mood. She then responded to the praise. "Thank you, my lord. I promise you that before too long I shall have this forest as dark and evil as it can be." She then let an evil smile cross her lips as she added, "and more." The last two words caused every being present around her web to laugh evilly. All the lizard men present were laughing, a hiss-sounding laugh. The treants were also laughing, which she could actually understand. The spiders were clicking their mandibles together in a similar way. Even Scorn's image was laughing as it faded away. Once the image was gone, she cracked her whip to get their attention. She pointed to the lizardmen. "Take that rune stone and hide it somewhere secure. I don't want anyone to be able to reach it." She saw the lizardmen bow and then take the runestone away. She then turned to the treants. "I want you to scour the treetops. Find any more enclaves of resistance. We need to eliminate any forces that are left here. The forest will be as dark and evil as Scorn wants it to be." With that, She watched as tree ants raised their claws and ran out onto the tree branches. She was sure more of the encampments of her former elf-like race would fall before too long.